Well, hello there. Welcome back to Thomas Frank Explains, and to a tutorial that I am pumped that I finally get to put out and share with you. In this video, we are going to be taking live data from YouTube and automatically sending it over to Notion via the Notion API. And we're going to do it without any coding whatsoever. So if you have zero programming skills, zero programming experience, it does not matter because we're going to do this completely 100% no code style. And just to jump right into it, let me show you exactly what we are going to accomplish in this video. Here, I've got a sample videos database with a few of the different videos from this very channel, and I've got their titles, their URLs, but I also have their view counts, like counts, comment counts, and their publish dates. All of this data is pulled directly from YouTube automatically into Notion. And we even have the thumbnails pulled directly from YouTube set as our page covers here. So I'm going to be building this inside of a demo copy of Creator's Companion, which is my complete templatized version of the exact system my team and I use for all of my content planning, which means that once we're done building this, you'll actually be able to go over and see my demo version and see all the live data for yourself. But you're also going to be able to build this for yourself. So if you are a YouTuber, buckle up because we are about to start bringing your YouTube stats directly into Notion. Now, as always, I've got a table of contents for this tutorial. You'll find it right here on screen, also in the description down below. So feel free to skip around or reference different parts if you need to again and again. And I will also mention there is a written version of this tutorial over on my website. So if you want a written version or you want just something you can easily reference with a table of contents on the side, you may want to check out the written version as well. I will also mention that the written version has some easily copyable things that you can paste into your Notion workspace. Like for instance, this formula we're going to be using a little bit later in the tutorial, you can just copy this directly from the written version and paste it into Notion. So I'll have that linked in the description down below. Definitely check it out. And before we start getting into the exact steps, I want to briefly go over what you're going to need for this tutorial. The first thing you're going to need is a Notion database that is prepped with your YouTube content. And if you currently don't have that, you've got a couple of different options. First, just manually create a database, and we're going to go through the process of adding the specific properties that you need in that database in this tutorial a little bit later, or you can grab one of my templates. I've actually created a sample video template right here that is completely free. It's in the description down below, and it actually has all of the properties you're going to need already within the template. So if you want to skip step one of this video, just grab this sample data template and you can work off this at least as an example. You'll also find on this little sample data template a complete version, which basically shows you what it should look like at the end of the day. You can also use my full template for content creators, Creator's Companion. You can find that over at thomasjfrank.com/cc. And if you are a serious YouTuber or content creator, you may want to check that out because it is a complete one-stop shop, full solution for managing your entire content creation business across multiple channels. But like I said, if you don't want to use a template, we're going to go through the process of prepping any Notion database for this tutorial. The second thing you're going to need is a Google API key, which will allow you to actually work with the YouTube data API. Now, if you don't know what an API is or an API key is, don't worry because this tutorial is going to show you every single thing that you need to know. Additionally, the written version of the tutorial has a full primer section. So if you've never heard of APIs before, you can open this little toggle right here, and I've written a bit of a primer on what an API is and what it actually does. And I've written it from the perspective of a no-coder. I personally don't know how to code very well myself, and in the past, I've been quite intimidated by API tutorials because they all seem to assume that I know how to code, and I really kind of don't. So if you're in the same boat as me, you can definitely check this out. You also can totally ignore this because, like I said, we're going to go step by step, and really all you need is a key from Google that we're going to paste into our third tool that you will need, which is a make.com account. Now, make.com is what I call an automation builder platform. It's very much like Zapier, if you've ever heard of that. It allows you to connect different web apps together and build custom web flows between them. Now, I use Zapier. I also use Make, and I found that Make is quite a bit more powerful and more flexible than Zapier. It's got a bit of a higher learning curve, but don't worry, I will show you everything you need to do in this video. And the nice thing is that it's quite a bit cheaper than Zapier, and they have a very generous free tier, and we'll be able to do every single thing in this tutorial using their free tier. So with all of that preamble and priming out of the way, let's actually start this tutorial with the preparation process in Notion itself. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using a public demo copy of my Creator's Companion template, so you'll actually actually be able to check out the full results of this afterwards by checking out the link in the description down below. Now, what I need to do first is actually add a couple of new properties to my database so I can actually bring in my view counts, my comment counts, my like counts, etc. So I'm going to be using my Thomas Frank Explains channel as the example here. So we're going to be doing a lot of work inside of this channel here, and specifically we're going to go down to the completed projects area. Now again, you can use any Notion database for this. The main thing you're going to want to make sure you have before we actually get started in earnest is a list of videos inside your database. And the most important thing to have filled out inside of your list of videos is to have a URL property that has the actual YouTube video links here. Now, one thing we're not going to be handling in this tutorial is error handling. So if you have a typo inside of one of your YouTube links, you may break your automation. So just make sure that your YouTube links here are actually correct and they do link to your videos. So I've got my entire Thomas Frank Explains channel history here, and I've got all of my YouTube URLs to all my videos there, and that is basically what I need to get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do is add a few new properties for tracking my views, my comments, my likes, and then we're going to add a formula property for extracting the YouTube ID from this URL property. Now, because I'm using Creator's Companion, one thing I do need to make sure is that my database is not locked. So I'm going to open any page here, and it opens in SidePeek, so I'll click this open in full page icon right here. And then I'm going to go to the actual database that all of this content lives in, which is called Master Content Tracker. Now I notice that it is currently unlocked. If you are a user of this template, you might see that it's locked like this. So all you would want to do is come up to the three-dot menu here and unlock the database so you can then make changes to it. From that point, I can open any page that I want. So I'll just open this one right here. And I want to add those properties. So I'll open up more properties right here. And I'm going to start adding some properties. So the first one is going to be a number type property, and I'm going to call it views. And I'm going to do that for comments and likes as well. So number, likes, and comments. So these are the three statistics properties that I'm going to be using to bring in my actual YouTube stats from the YouTube API. If you don't have it already, you're also going to want to have a publish date property, and that's going to obviously have the date type. We're going to be bringing in the publish date from YouTube, so you don't actually have to set it yourself. And finally, we want to add one additional property, which is going to be a formula type property called YTID. So I'll add a property here, search for formula. And I'm going to call that YTID in all caps with a space between. And then I'm going to open up my formula editor, and I actually want to paste in a formula that's going to extract the video ID from the video's URL. So let me explain that really quickly just to make sure you understand it fully, and then we'll actually go get the formula code itself. I'm going to go back to my Thomas Frank Explains database here. Let's go down to my completed projects. And here we can see the different URLs for all my different videos here. And they're very, very similar until we get to the little code here after this $V equals. This is your video ID. So every single YouTube URL is basically www.youtube.com/watch, and then it has the ID here. So what we need to do is pull this ID out of the URL, because when we work with the YouTube API later on, again, no code in make, we want to pass the ID to the YouTube API, not the entire URL. So to do that, we're going to be using that YTID formula property to bring in the value of the URL property and extract that ID. So I'm going to go over to the written version of this tutorial, and over on the table of contents here, we have step 4, create the YTID formula property. And there you're going to find the actual formula, which you can click to copy and then paste into Notion. Now I do need to figure out something that's wrong here because I realized it was throwing an error. So I'm going to copy the exact text here and then bring it into Notion and see what happens. So it does look like I have an error down here. It looks like my little code block in WordPress is adding 2 spaces. So if you get an error down there, just delete a couple of times, and you should get an output like this. And basically what this is doing is it's taking in our URL property and it's passing it through what's called a regular expression to just isolate the ID here and output it. And I'm not going to explain exactly how this works because this is not a regex tutorial. However, in the written version, beneath that formula, you'll find a little toggle box, and I've written up a full guide on exactly what's going on in that regular expression. And in addition to that, if you haven't seen it already, I have created a full formula reference for Notion, and that basically documents the entirety of their formula feature, including a full guide on regular expressions inside of Notion. So if you want to learn how that regular expression works, how to write your own, how to change it up, check out this guide. It is a full technical reference for every regular expression feature that is supported inside of Notion formulas. So going back to our Notion workspace here, I believe we now have all the different properties we're going to need. We've got our YouTube ID, we have our comment, like, and view counts, and then we have our publish date. And then the cover is something that is not an actual database property, but we are going to be adding the thumbnail as the page cover for each one of these inside of Notion. Now there are 3 additional properties that we can add. I'm not sure why I did this. 3 additional properties that we can add, because if you were paying attention earlier, inside of this little template here that I've provided for free, and in the gallery tab, we can see that I have my view, my like, and my comment counts with these little nice emojis next to them to label them. And to create these, we have to create yet 3 more little formula properties. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. If you don't care about it and you just want the counts like this, go ahead and skip to the next timestamp. But I like these. I think they're aesthetic and they make this little gallery view look way, way better. So we're going to go ahead and create 3 additional properties inside of our database, and I'm going to call them labels for each of these. So I'll go ahead and add another formula property. I'm going to call this view label. I'll do another one for like label, and a final one for comment label. All formula properties. And once again, I have added the code for these within the written version. It's actually down at the very bottom in final result. So I'm going to copy all of this stuff here, and I will paste it into my view label right here. Once again, I'm getting an error. So it looks like the code blocks from WordPress are adding 2 additional spaces after the end of the formula. So I will debug that later. But now I've got yet another string with some regular expressions that will ensure there's actually commas inside of my numbers, even though they're formatted as a string. And then I've got my little emoji here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And this one works for views. I will change it for likes. So I'm going to change this property reference from views to likes. And then I'm going to change this little emoji to a thumbs up. And finally, I'll do it for my comment label as well. Change this emoji to speech. And I believe on macOS, this blank speech emoji actually doesn't exist. So I'm going to make sure I use the right speech balloon icon instead. And then I'll change this property reference from views to comments. So we're referencing the correct property. And just to show you how this works, I'm going to put some dummy data inside of these. And notice if I have more than 3 characters here, there's actual commas added in there. That is why we have this complicated double replace formula expression with all these regular expressions inside of them. They're basically just adding commas after each group of 3 different digits from the end of string here. So we're good now on that. If you wanted to, you can go through and hide these. I'll do it in super speed here. And now when I hide these properties on the actual page, I don't see them. And that's good because the only place that I want to see them is actually on this thumbnail view and this analysis view. So before I move on, I'm going to go ahead and format these database views so that I can actually see the properties I've set up. I'll first do this on analysis view by going to the view menu here, going to properties, and then searching for comments, for views, and for likes. And I'm using the actual number properties here because this is a table view and it makes more sense to show the actual numbers. I can also, if I want, set the formatting here to numbers with commas, which is going to make it look a little bit better. And then finally, I'm going to go over to my thumbnail view, and instead of showing those actual number properties, I now want to show my view label, my comment label, and my like label. I'll put likes above comments. So that way, I'm going to have this really nice gallery style view where I can see all of my stats here, the thumbnail once we bring it in, and anything else we want if we wanted to add those. And with that, we now have a perfectly prepped Notion database, which we'll be able to use to bring in data from the YouTube API and keep it updated on basically any schedule that we want. So the next step before we can actually go over to make.com and start building our automation is we need to get a API key from Google so we can actually work with the YouTube API. And if you've never worked with APIs before, one key concept that I do want to share with you here is that with pretty much any API, you often need some kind of authentication or credential credential to actually get data from that API or to interact with it. And YouTube's data API is no different. If you don't have an API key from Google, you're not going to be able to get anything back from it. So before we can start building automation, we need to go over to the Google Cloud area and actually get an API key. So first things first, make sure that you are signed into your Google account. And from there, you want to go over to console.cloud.google.com. And I'll have that text on screen and linked below as well. And if you've never gone to Google Cloud before, it's going to ask you to basically enable Google Cloud for your account. So go ahead and click whatever modal pop-up that comes up for that. And then the next thing you need to do, if you haven't already, is to create a project where we can actually enable APIs and get our API key. So I'm going to go up to this little drop down right here, and I'm going to click New Project. And if you don't have that dropdown, then the next thing you can do is open up the little navigation menu here, go to APIs and Services, and go to Enabled APIs and Services. If you've never created a project before, it's going to prompt you to do that, and it should be right up here. So I'm going to go up and create a brand new project. I'm going to call this YouTube Notion Automation, and I don't need to add any sort of organization here. So I can just go ahead and create this. It's going to spin a little bit. And now I've got my project created. So I could go right here and hit select project from the notifications menu. I'm just gonna go ahead and actually switch to this project from this little drop down here. And from here, if you're not already on it, you'll wanna go to the navigation menu, go to APIs and Services, and then go to Enabled APIs and Services. So this is where we're going to essentially enable the YouTube data API for this particular project, which will allow us to get an API key for accessing it. So you're gonna see this Enable APIs and Services button right here. Let's go ahead and click that. And then we can search for APIs. So if I type in YouTube, notice there are quite a few different APIs here. And the one that we want, because we're kind of just dipping our toes into automation right here, is the YouTube Data API v3. This is essentially the public version of the YouTube API. It's the one that you can use to get data about basically any video. You can get pretty much any data that's publicly available on the actual YouTube website. So we can get view counts, comment counts, like counts, so we can get lots of other stuff. But what we can't get with the data API is like your internal YouTube analytics data. So like average view duration, that kind of thing. I may cover that in future tutorials because I want to get that stuff in the Notion myself, but that requires some heavier duty authentication. So we're going to dip our toes into the world of automation by working with the Data API v3 here. So we should see Data API v3 right here. We can click on it, and then we can go ahead and enable it for this particular project. So once enabled, you're going to see a screen just like this, and you will see a Create Credentials button up at the top here. If you don't, we can also go to the Credentials menu right here. And here's where we can actually create the API key that we're going to use in the next step of this tutorial. So to do that, let's go ahead and create credentials right here. And if you see this little message for remember to configure the OAuth consent screen, don't worry about that. We are not creating a user-facing application here. We're just creating something for ourselves, so you don't have to worry about it. So we can just skip that and go ahead and click create credentials right here. And what we want to choose here is an API key. These other things are for other purposes. We want API key. So it's going to create a key for us, and I'm actually going to delete this key after this tutorial because this is something that you want to keep completely secret. Nobody else should be able to access this because if they could, they'd be able to make requests to this API basically saying that they're you. So once I'm done filming this, I'm going to be deleting this and creating a new version to run the public demo of my Creators Companion with my live stats. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and copy it to my clipboard. And then I want to go over to Edit API Key right here, because I want to add at least one restriction here. Now, we don't want to add application restrictions. I've tested out restricting to a specific website and trying to pass in make.com. That doesn't work. I'm guessing make.com uses some sort of other hidden domain for passing their requests. So we'll leave that blank, but we do want to add an API restriction. Right now, this key is basically completely unrestricted. So any API enabled for this project would be able to be accessed with this key. And I don't want that. I want to be as safe as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and restrict this key. And I'm only going to allow the YouTube Data API v3 to be accessed with it. Again, this is just a precaution. You shouldn't be sharing your API key anyway, but it's just good practice to do. So now we have a completely configured API key. I've got it on my clipboard, and that means we can now move to the most fun part of this tutorial, which is actually building our automation. And to do that, we're going to be using an automation platform called make.com. Now, if you have been using this in the past, you might know it used to be called Integromat. Now it's called make.com. And if you don't have an account, I do have a link in the description down below. It's my referral link. So if you would like to use that to support me, thank you very much. If not, you can just go over to make.com and sign up and create an account. And one of the things that I love about make.com over, say, Zapier is they basically do not restrict any of their tools on their free account. You can use pretty much everything they have except for a few different premium apps like Twitter, and it allows you to do a lot of stuff without actually paying anything. So once you're actually signed in, you're gonna see a dashboard like this. Now you're not gonna see any active scenarios because you will not have built any. I built one for the written version of this tutorial last night, so I've got that there, and we can actually reference that later. But the first thing that I would like to point your attention to is this little free button under the subscription heading. So let's go ahead and click that because I do want to show you the limitations of the free plan. The big one is this 1,000 operations per month limit. And this is pertinent because the automation that we're building here is kind of a data intensive one. And in my testing, the most efficient that I've been able to get this on make.com is to use 2 operations per video when we're updating stats, plus 1 additional operation whenever we're setting the thumbnail per video as the page cover. And then there's just 1 operation anytime we run it just to query the Notion database. So because we're only setting the thumbnail pretty much 1 time and then we can filter and ignore it, I consider this to be a 2n plus 1 automation, where n is the number of videos that you're updating. So basically that means if you want to be able to stay on the free plan here, you're going to want to set your automation to run infrequently if you have a lot of videos. And if you do have a ton of videos, like thousands of videos, then you may actually want to upgrade to one of their paid plans, or you can start to learn some code, and you can do this with other platforms like Pipedream, where if you use just a little bit of JavaScript, you can actually do this a lot more cheaply. So we can at least set this up and test it on the free plan. After that point, you can decide what you want to do, either filtering for specific videos you want to test, or just not updating as often as you might, like we could do like weekly instead of daily, or upgrading to, say, the core plan, which is the one that I use. The next thing we're gonna do, and I guess to actually kick this off, is to go over to the scenarios tab, and this is where we're actually gonna start building our automation. And to sort of prime your brain here, I'm gonna open up the version that I built for the blog last night and show you basically what this is gonna look like when we're done. So at a high level, what we're gonna do is we're first going to query our Notion database, and we're going to get a list of videos from the Notion database that we actually want to send to the YouTube API for getting stats. So that's the first step. We are then gonna make what's called an HTTP request to the YouTube data API to actually get that data. Now you might be wondering, why isn't there a YouTube icon here? And that is because while Make has a lot of different apps, you will notice that if you type in YouTube, it is conspicuously missing from their list of supported apps. This is also the case for Zapier. They have a YouTube app, but it can do some limited things. It can't get stats from the YouTube data API. Luckily, it is very, very easy to use their generic HTTP request module to just send a request to the API as long as we configure it correctly, and we can get all the data that we want. And I will point out that this HTTP module is very, very useful. If you get into make.com and you start building additional automations, anytime you run into a limitation where they don't have a supported app, you can usually use this generic module as long as you understand how to interact with a particular web app's API to get the data that you need, or to even send data to another web service. So we're going to be doing that. Then we are going to use what's called a router to create some conditional logic and a branching path. Now routers, as I will explain later on in more detail, will actually cause your data to use both paths in the router as long as they fit the criteria for the paths. So we are always going to update our statistics over on Notion, so our view counts, like counts, comment counts, that kind of thing. And then if the thumbnail is not set as the page cover, we're also going to set the thumbnail from YouTube as the page cover. And we have to create branching logic here because Make's Notion update a database item module here does not allow us to set the page cover. We have to use the update a page module instead. So hopefully this has primed your brain for the automation that we're going to be creating here. Let's go back to the actual scenarios area. and we're going to click create a new scenario. And this is where we're going to actually get started building our automation. So the first thing we're going to do is click this big old plus button that you just can't help but click and search for Notion and click that app there. Now it's going to give you a whole bunch of different options for actions here. The one that we want right now is called search objects. We want to send a filtered query to Notion to get back a list of database rows that meet that filter criteria. So I'll click search objects here. And the first thing that I have to do is basically create a connection to my Notion account. So I'm going to click add right here because I don't have one already. I'm going to click Notion public as my connection type. And then I'm going to give it a descriptive name. So let's just go ahead and call it, actually my Notion public connection is totally fine because we might be using it later for other things. I'll click save here. And then I'm going to get this little dialog that pops up. And this is what I can use to actually connect to Notion. So first things first, I will need to sign into Notion. And then I'm going to be given the option to let make access College Info Geek. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I am having make access the correct workspace. And I actually have my little public Creators Companion demo inside of the Ultimate Brain demo workspace. So I'm going to change my workspace up there. And then I'm going to click select pages. So when you're allowing an integration to have access to your Notion workspace, you're going to get this dialog here, and you can give it access to specific pages inside of your workspace instead of the entire workspace. And that's pretty useful for privacy. A couple of things to know about the permissions here. When I give access to this Creators Companion demo right here, any child page of this page is going to be basically bundled in with that access. So if there's something that you didn't want the integration to have access to, you would want to make sure it's not underneath one of these top level pages that you're adding here. The other thing I want to make sure of is that the actual database that I'm working on is contained within this page right here. So if I go back over to Notion and I open up just any of these rows here, I can once again open as a full page to access the breadcrumbs, and I can see that my master content tracker is actually contained by the Creators Companion demo, which means that when I give access to this top level page, Make.com is also going to get access to the master content tracker as well, which is what I want because it needs to be able to query the actual database. And if you're a bit confused here, I've got an entire video explaining everything you need to know about Notion databases. I will have that linked below as well. Definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. But this can be a point of confusion for certain people because of the existence of what are called linked databases. So if I go back to my Thomas Frank Explains page here, I have a view of the master content tracker sitting on this page, but this is not the actual location of this database. In this case, it doesn't matter because this page is contained by the Creators Companion demo, and so is, if we verify once again, the master content tracker. But sometimes you may have a database that lives completely in a different place inside of Notion, and then you've got linked views of that database in the place you may be looking at. So make sure you know where your database is and make sure that it's actually added here as well. So going back to here, I'm going to make sure that my Creators Companion demo is added. I'm going to click Allow Access. And now I can see that my Notion public connection is up here in the connection area. And one thing to note is that now that I've created this connection, it's actually going to be over here in the connections area, and I'll be able to use it again for additional automations if I make them in the future. So that's a nice thing. The same thing will be true of the API key that we add later on. It's going to be in this little keys area, so you can reuse that as well. And before I move on, I want to show you something over on Notion again. If I go back to my master content tracker, now that I've added this integration, I can go over to the three-dot menu right here, and underneath connections, I can see that now Make has access to this page, and I can see where it's inheriting those permissions as well. It says from Creators Companion, and I can actually click that as well. So if you're ever curious or you're ever wondering, what integrations or connections have access to what pages, you can always go to that three-dot menu and you can see these are the apps that have access to this particular page. So going back to Make, it is now time to actually create a database query so we can pull all of our videos from Notion and then send them on to YouTube. So for search objects, we're going to keep this at database items. That's what we want to pull, specific pages from a database. And then for the database ID, there are two different ways to actually get that. Make.com makes this very easy. We can actually click search right here, and I can type in the name of my database. So I'll just do master content tracker. And it should pull in the database ID without issue here. And there it is. If for any reason you have problems with this, you can also manually get your database ID, and I'll quickly show you how to do that because it's a good handy skill to have. So once again, I'm going to go back to my actual master content tracker. I need to make sure that I'm on the database itself. I can go to this little three-dot menu here, and I'm going to click copy link right here. I'm going to open up a Notepad instance, because the database ID is actually contained within the URL for this database. And it's contained after this final slash and before this question mark v equals. So it's this string of characters right here. And we can verify that it starts with 8A and ends with 20. If I go back here, 8A20. And these dashes here are automatically added by make.com. We don't actually need them. If I were to paste in that database ID, this would work just fine. From there, we want to create a filter criteria because we're basically querying our Notion database to pull in database rows. And we only want to pull rows that actually have a YouTube URL because those are the only ones that we can actually send on to the YouTube API. So what we're going to do here is select our property, and it's going to be the URL property, which you can see is of type URL. I'm going to choose contains, and then I'm going to put in youtube.com. Now, because I'm putting in youtube.com, it's important that the videos I'm tracking have the actual youtube.com URL. So right here, you can see, if I go back to my table, you can see that I have the actual youtube.com URL. This is important because if we go to YouTube, and let's just say we go to my Thomas Frank Explains channel, when you pull URL from YouTube, if you click the share button down here, you're gonna get this little short link, u2.be. And our current automation as it's set up is not built to deal with these types of links. Our regular expression in that formula we set up earlier is not built to pull the ID from this. So if you wanted to use these, you would have to make things a bit more robust. Right now, I'm just gonna recommend making sure that you actually have the youtube.com link on all of your Notion database items. So once again, we have URL here, text contains, youtube.com, and then we can set a limit. Now, when you're working with the Notion API manually, there is a limit of 100 database rows that can be pulled per query, and there's a concept called pagination for going beyond that if you need to pull more. Make.com actually does the pagination behind the scenes for you, so I can actually pull in more than 100 videos if I want to. I'll set this at 200 for now, click OK, and now my Notion query object is set up. So the next thing I want to do after I click save right here is actually run this one time because I need to pull some data from Notion before I can do useful things later on. So I can right click this right here. I'll hit run this module only. And if things are set up correctly, I should get a green check mark right here indicating that the run was successful. And then I'm going to have a little speech bubble with this 1 right here. Now the 1 indicates that this operation has taken 1 operation out of my 1,000 operations per month limit. So I can click right here. And this is actually going to bring up this little bundle explorer here. And we can see that the data from our Notion rows, each Notion row is contained within a bundle here. Now, if you do have any kind of programming background, you will probably see these for what they are, which is objects that are contained within an array. If you don't know what any of that means, don't worry. They don't even use the word array here. They use the word collection, I believe, for objects, and they don't even mention arrays, but that is basically what is being pulled in here. And I will cover what these bundles are and what they do a little bit later because it's going to be a bit easier to understand once we have a couple of different modules. But just for now, you can see that we actually have output, and I know that I have quite a few videos that I'm tracking. So I can see here that I've got 36 bundles, and that does seem about right because I believe I put in about 36 videos that I wanted to track. So the next thing we want to do, if we drag this over here, it'll be a little bit easier, is to set up an additional module. So I can click this add another module button right here, and here I'm going to search for HTTP. And this is, again, that generic HTTP request module that's going to allow us to do any kind of request to basically any API that we can access. So the action that we want to select here is make an API key auth request because we need to pass an API key. So I'll click that. And then just like we did before with the Notion integration, we have to actually set up a credential here. So I'm going to click add. And then I want to go ahead and grab my API key from Google. Now I've probably copied something since I copied it to my clipboard. So I'll once again show this key. And once again, I'm going to delete this after this tutorial, so it is not accessible by anybody else watching this video. And I'm going to go ahead and click the key field here and add that in there. And it does nicely keep it hidden for me. I'm going to call this my YouTube data API key. I'm going to make sure my API key placement is in the query string, not in the header. And then I need to make sure that my API key parameter name is just key. And if you're wondering, how do you find all this kind of stuff out? You can actually go to the documentation for this. So I'm going to Google videos list because I know this is a what's called method for the YouTube Data API. And I'm not going to go too much into this in the video. I've got more about this in the written article, but you can actually try this method out, and you're going to see, if I zoom way in, it should be easier to see, that I've got a request here where I can see that part of the query string is key equals your API key. So I'm basically reconstructing this inside of make.com, and I need to make sure that my key here is just called key, and then I'm actually passing my valid API key. So going back here, I've got that set up. And once again, this is now a reusable credential. It's going to be in the keys menu, and I can use it again for future automations, which is pretty cool. So going on, we now need to specify the URL that we're going to access and then the method. And once again, if we go over to the written version of this tutorial, if you want to know more about this, I've actually written a bit of a primer on what APIs are. And this goes into the different methods that you can use for accessing APIs, what endpoints are. I'm not going to cover those in this video. I may do a more in-depth primer video later on. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that, but I've got this here as a resource in the meantime that you can check out. For now, we're going to actually specify what the URL is and then what the method is. So the method that we want to use, which is right here in the YouTube Data API reference guide, is called videos list. And we can see here that this returns a list of videos that match the API request parameters. That is essentially what we want to do. We want to get information about a video, and we're going to pass the video ID to YouTube in order to tell it which video we want information on. So really the only thing we need to know here is how to make this HTTP request. And we can see here it says get, and it says the URL right here. Well, we can actually just copy these two pieces of information and pass them directly to our make.com automation. Now, if you do have a coding background or just a little bit of experience, you might notice that with certain like JavaScript libraries or other programming languages, you may have to actually specify list as the action you're taking. Well, when we're making the HTTP request, which is kind of like just pasting a URL in your browser, we don't actually need to do that because the method here, get, basically tells YouTube, oh, we want to use that list action. So we're gonna go back to our make.com automation. I'm gonna go ahead and paste in that URL, and then the method is already set at get. We have other options here, but get is the one that we actually need. There are going to be no headers because the query string is actually where we're going to specify everything. So the next thing I want to do is hit add parameter, and I'm going to have a couple of items that I create here. So the first one is going to be called part. And this is where we're going to specify what we want from the YouTube API. So if we go back to that videos list documentation here, we can scroll down to the parameters and you can see the options you have for basically getting information about any kind of video. And if you want to experiment, you can actually click this little try it button and pass any of these you want into the little try it area, and you can get lots of different information from YouTube. Now remember that what we want in this video are the view, like, and comment counts. We want the publish date, and we want the URL for the thumbnail. And to get those, we need to pass two different part parameters. The first one is going to be snippet, and then the other one is going to be statistics. So what we can do inside of make.com is just separate those by a comma. So I'll go snippet, comma, statistics. And then make.com is going to properly format the query string and the URL for you. You don't have to do that. You just basically fill out these fields here. The other thing we need to do is actually pass the ID of the video that we want. So going back to the API documentation here, and realize that this is a good introduction to APIs and how they work if you've never used one before, we also can see that we need to pass an ID of a video. And one cool thing about this method, if you use it in other contexts, is you can actually pass multiple IDs at once, but I found that with make.com, it's not very useful, so we're gonna be passing the IDs one at a time. And to do that, we're gonna be doing something called mapping. So I'm gonna type ID here as the name or the key for this parameter, and then the value we're actually going to pull from this Notion Search Objects module. And this is why it was very important that we ran this first, because it actually is going to bring in all of these properties here. Now, if you're working off your own database or you're using my little simple template, it's not going to look this crazy confusing. I've got a lot of different properties inside of Creator's Companion, like keyword tracking and editors, comment labels. Like basically, it's a full suite of properties for content planning and management. But what I want to find is that YTID property that we created earlier. And if I open up the toggle, and I'll zoom in a little bit to hopefully make this easier to see, I'm going to see that in the string subproperty for YTID, I've got the actual video string. So if I click this, it's going to show up here in the value field. And this is what's called mapping inside of make.com. So basically, anytime that we're running this automation, when a bundle goes from the Notion step to the HTTP YouTube API step, each time it's going to pull that YTID string and pass it here, which will pass it to YouTube. So we'll go ahead and click out of that. And the last thing that we want to do here on this HTTP module is make sure that we are parsing the response. So this is essentially going to bring out the response and format it as what's called JSON, or JavaScript Object Notation. Now, once again, this is a thing you don't need to know a whole lot about, but if you do want to learn about it, over on the written version, we have a primer for JSON as well. And this will basically teach you what you're looking at and what all this stuff means. So check that out. And once again, I may do a primer video in the future if we get more into API tutorials like this. But the only thing you need to know right now is that you do want to parse the response, because if you don't, it's going to come out as just a simple string of text and it's going to be way harder to work with. So we'll parse the response there. We'll click OK. And now we can actually set up the module for sending data back to Notion. But first, before we do that, I want to go ahead and actually run this as we have it. So I'll click save once again to save my work, and then I'm going to click run once. And if I've set things up correctly, I should, as we can see here, get some numbers up here and again, a green check mark here. So if we click in to the little bundle explorer, we can see that multiple operations have run. And this is where I'm going to explain how the bundles essentially work in make.com. So when I click here on the Notion module here, we can see that I have many different bundles of information that are within the output here. And how a make.com operation works is each bundle is going to be sent down the line into each module that we have set up inside of our automation. If you've ever played like Pokemon, especially the old school games, you might have seen those directional puzzles where you kind of hit a direction block, it changes your direction, you hit the next directional block, it changes your direction. Well, it's kind of like that, except for there's lots of different characters. And if you've ever played Choo Choo Rocket for the Sega Dreamcast, it's very like that. You've got a line of mice and they're all going in sequence and they're all hitting these different directional blocks that are essentially taking an input and then outputting something a little bit different, modifying that data. So that is why we have a giant collection of bundles taking up one operation. And then on the HTTP step, we have multiple different operations. We have one operation per bundle. And that's what makes this a kind of operation heavy workflow. But if we go into any of these operations, we can go into the output here. And if we've done this correctly, we're actually going to see our data. So once again, I'll zoom in to make this a bit easier to see. And if I go into my items collection here, I can actually see, look, I've got my ID for the video. If I go into the snippet, I've got my publish date, I've got my title, I've got my full description as well. There's all kinds of useful information that we're going to be bringing into Notion. If I open up statistics, I've got my view count, like count, and comment count at the moment that I queried the YouTube API. This data is now not going to change. So if we want to get a live updated count or make sure that our Notion database is at least updated on a schedule, we need to be querying the YouTube API on a schedule as well, because it's going to return the counts at the time we sent the query. But yeah, you can explore this. You can open up these toggles, kind of see how it works. You'll notice that for thumbnails, we actually have several different choices here. The default is very small, 120 pixels by 90 pixels, 320 by 180 for medium, and so on. So we're going to actually be using the max res version for setting our Notion page cover. And it won't actually be uploading it to Notion either. It's just going to be setting it as an external URL to display. And with this, we now have our query step set up, and we can go ahead and actually start sending this back to Notion. So once again, I'll zoom out a bit to make this easier to see. Another cool thing about Make is we can hold Control and scroll to actually make things easier to see on our canvas here. And if you hold space, you can drag things around. So it's this very visual automation builder that's very easy to work with. So the next thing I'm going to do is add another module. Once again, I will select Notion as my choice here. But now what I want to do is update a database item. So I'll click that. I will keep my public Notion connection here. And for entering the database ID, we actually want to change this from select from the list to enter manually. And this will allow us to once again map data from a previous step in our automations workflow. So I'm going to click the database ID here. I'm going to go under my Notion search objects module here. I can toggle this if I want to. And I'm going to find the parent database ID. So if I click that, this is going to pass the actual ID of the database from this step. And then in page ID, I want to do the same thing. I want to find Notion search objects and I want to find page ID. So this is going to make sure that the ID that we're updating is the same one per bundle that was actually pulled from Notion. And then I want to actually set up the fields. So fields here map to the properties inside of Notion. So once again, going back to Notion, just to remind you, what we want to update are the comments, views, likes, and publish date. And then we also want to later on set our page cover, which we cannot do in this step. So I'm going to click add item for fields. And then for the key, we actually have to type this. We are not able to map it. It does not work if we map it, I found. So I'm going to type actually just views. I'm going to make sure that my value type is actually the type from the property over in Notion. So this is a number. I'll find number and click there. And then the value we actually can map. So this is the point where we're actually going to start digging into this response from the Notion API. So I'll scroll down here just so you can see this is the field we're working on. And to find that views count, we want to go into our items array here. And then we're going to see statistics, toggle that open, and then we'll see view count. So if I click that, we can now see that we are pulling from data, items, statistics, and view count. And then we want to do that for our other stat properties as well. So once again, I'll add an item. This time I will call it likes. I will make sure it's a value type number, and I will map the like count. I'll do that for comments as well. So comments, number type, and we'll grab the comment count. And then finally, we'll add one additional item for our publish date. And again, make sure that your property names are what they actually are in Notion, and that your value types map to the property types in Notion as well. So this time we want to make sure that it's date. And then in Notion, we have start time and end time. We want to use start time, and we do not want to include the time here. So we're going to click start time, and we are going to find within snippet the published at property here. One nice thing is that the formatting of the date string from the YouTube API is exactly what Notion wants to see. So we don't have to do any kind of date parsing or date formatting. We can just pass this value and we're good to go. So I'll click OK here. And once again, we can test this. So let's first look at our analysis view and verify we have nothing here. Let's make these nice and narrow because they're a bit wide right now. So once we hit run once, we should see our view, like, and comment counts along with our publish date auto-populating into here if everything is set up correctly. So I'm going to, once again, hit save. I'm going to hit run once, and we've got a green check mark here. So let's go back over to Notion and see if we can see things happening. Look here. There it is. Auto magic view, like, comment, and publish date population. Super cool. And if all you want to bring in is your stats from YouTube, you don't care about the thumbnails as your page covers, then you are completely done, and you can skip to the timestamp on screen right now to simply enable and schedule your automation. However, I think it would be pretty cool, once again, to have those thumbnails as our page covers. So we're going to finish this tutorial by actually setting that up. And the way that we're going to do that is by using the update a page module instead of the update a database item module, because we cannot access the page cover property from this. But because we're trying to be as efficient with how many operations we use as possible, we want to make sure that we're only setting the page cover URL if it's not already set from the YouTube thumbnail. So what I'm going to do here is between this final Notion item and this HTTP request, I'm going to right click on this little dotted line, and I'm going to hit add a router. And what a router essentially does is, as bundles are working their way through the make.com scenario, when they hit a router, they're going to go along each path of the router in sequence as long as they can. So if I click the plus button here on the router, I'm going to get a new path. And we can see here, there are no filters set up on either of these paths. So as a bundle travels down, it's going to go boop, boop, hit this one, and then it's going to go boop, hit this one. So the second path we want to set up here, once again, is going to be a Notion module. We want to click update a page for this one, and we'll use the exact same connection. And here is where we're going to be able to access the page cover property once it loads. So once again, we'll map the page ID, and it's going to be just the page ID from #1 Notion search objects. Boom, boom. Our title's already set, our emoji icon's already set. We can leave these blank unless you want to pull your titles from YouTube in case you change titles lots of times. But what I want is cover URL link right here. So I'll click that, and I will dig into my HTTP request here. I'm going to go into items. I'm going to go into snippet, And then I'm gonna see thumbnails right here. So what I wanna do is toggle into thumbnails, find max res, that is our 720p version, and I want the URL. So what this is gonna do is set this external URL as the page cover inside of Notion. And note, if you've never worked with page covers before, when you set a page cover, you can change the cover and you can actually set that as an external link. So that is basically what we're doing. We're just using the API to do it. Now, again, we wanna make sure that we are being efficient with our operation usage here. So after we click OK here, we want to click this little wrench icon and add a filter just to make sure that if the Notion page already has its page cover set as the thumbnail, we don't reset it because we're just wasting an operation if we do that. So I'm gonna call this label only set if blank, and I'm gonna make sure that the fallback route box is not checked here. And here I'm just gonna set up a filter condition. So I'm going to look for the page cover property here within Notion search objects. So cover, type external, URL, and I'm gonna set the filter condition to does not contain case insensitive. And then I'm gonna go ahead and find the ID of the video. This is useful because the ID of your video is contained within your YouTube URL, where you'd actually find it on youtube.com. It is also contained within the URL for your thumbnail, and we can actually verify that. So if we go back to our HTTP request right here, we can go into any old operation and we can find that data items snippet URL, open up max res there. If I expand this, I should get the entire thing. And if I copy this, I can see that my video's ID is actually contained within this string. And if I go to it, there is my beautiful thumbnail. So anyway, going back, I'll go ahead and click out of this. We now have our entire automation set up. So we've got our filter in place, and we can once again save this and then test it one more time to see if it works. So to do that, I'm going to prep by going over to the thumbnail view. We'll verify that we have none of our YouTube thumbnails for these videos set as the page covers. We also do have one page cover here that does not have its external URL set to the video ID, which is a filter condition we set up. So all of these should go through our entire automation and get their thumbnails here as the page covers. So let's go ahead and test things and see what happens. We'll click run once. We see green all over the place. So let's go over to Notion and see if we are getting thumbnails. Check that out. These kind of automations are so much fun for me to build. So this is super cool to actually see in action. And if we zoom out here, we can see that we have green check marks on all of our modules here. The router will not get a check mark, but the actual app modules will. And we now know that our automation is working. So the last thing we have to do is actually set it on a schedule and enable it. Now, right now, by default, it is set to go every 15 minutes. And we can see here that we have used 1 + 36 + 36 + 33 operations to do this. Now, next time I run it, this is not going to run because all my thumbnails are set, but we are still getting about 70 odd operations running every single time we do this automation. And if you want to stay on the free plan, you don't want to be running this every 15 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to run on days of the week, and I will just set it for Mondays at kind of doesn't matter, but I'll just set it for noon. And that way it's only running once per week, which means on average 4 times per month, we're going to be using this many operations to update my Notion database, which should keep me well within the limits of Make.com's free plan. The last thing we need to do is simply turn this scheduling tab from off to on, and our scenario is completely ready to go. And it will automatically, I guess I'll save changes here, it'll automatically keep our Notion database up to date with our YouTube view counts. So that is the tutorial, and hopefully in addition to helping you get this particular automation set up within Notion and YouTube, this has also introduced you to what you can do with no-code tools and different APIs like the Notion API and the YouTube API. Personally, I'm gonna be going into even more detail with my own copy of Creators Companion, getting YouTube analytics data in the future, so that way, if I want to, I can actually make predictions on how well specific videos are going to do, and then later on see how those predictions actually panned out and see it all in Notion. There's just so many possibilities here, and I'm super duper excited to actually dig into them. Now, a couple of different things that I'm going to mention to wrap this video up. Number one, if you do have a little bit of coding in your background, there is another tool called Pipedream, which I have just started getting into. And Pipedream is kind of like make.com, except for instead of giving you these modules where you just basically set up everything with no code, they have app modules where you can actually write JavaScript or Python. And that means if you have a coding background, you can do a lot more than you can do on make.com. You can do it much more cheaply, and they basically give you this infrastructure to run things without having to manage your own servers. So that's pretty cool. I've been kind of exploring that in my free time, and I made you tutorials for their platform as well in the future if there's a big enough level of demand for it. I will probably do at least the YouTube one because it's just a lot of fun. But beyond that, if you are a serious creator, especially if you have multiple different mediums that you're working in, like Twitter and blogging, podcasting, YouTube, definitely check out my Creators Companion template. It is a templatized version of the exact system that my team and I use to do all of our content planning. It allows us to capture ideas. It allows us to validate those ideas rigorously to make sure that our titles and our thumbnails are actually good. It allows us to capture research, write our scripts, and most importantly, it allows us to manage our editing process. There's an entire B-roll table where we can bring in our B-roll ideas, we can tag them, we can make sure that we're editing efficiently, and then, as we've shown you in this tutorial, we have an archive. So all of these could be projects that we work on actively and have the scripts and the B-roll lists and everything, which we can also access later on, but then it becomes an analytics tool, and that brings the entire process in one centralized place. So you can check that out over at thomasjfrank.com/cc. And if you also happen to want a complete productivity system for Notion, I've got another template called Ultimate Brain, and that is for tracking your tasks, your notes, your projects. It's got para organization from Tiago Forte's second brain course, and there is even a fully integrated version of both templates. So if you want the productivity system and a content creation headquarters, and you want those beautifully married together, integrated, there is a bundle version that does that. And if you use the code FALL50 at checkout, you can get $50 off of any of those template bundles or the templates themselves. As always, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Hopefully you found it to be useful, and hopefully you found it to be a useful introduction to no code and automation if you are new to those arenas. I'm very excited to do more content in this area in the future. It's super interesting for me. If you have different app integration tutorials that you would like to request, let me know in the comments down below. And last but not least, go over to thomasjfrank.com/fundamentals if you want to learn Notion. That is the complete beginner's guide to Notion, and you can also get onto my Notion Tips newsletter from that page. And once you're on that newsletter, I'm going to send you my entire Notion Tips resource archive. So all my free templates, but also basically anything I've created for learning Notion, from our keyboard shortcut reference to our markdown reference to our full formula reference. Everything I've created is in one nice bundled resource, and I'll send that to you right when you join the newsletter. Thanks again for watching. Follow me on Twitter at TomFrankly if you are on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.